Hello, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Megan, and as always, I'm really glad that you're watching this. So today I'm going to be sharing about tips and tricks for sensory sensitivity with cervical instability. This by far has been one of the most excruciating parts of cervical instability in my experience, and so I'm going to do multiple videos because I won't be able to cover everything that's been helpful for me in just this video. But in this specific one, I'm going to be talking about what you can do to help yourself. But with my experience with being sensitive to anything sensory is that most of it is being at the mercy of your environment and at the mercy of people in your life. So I'm going to do other helpful videos on environmental things you can do and tips and tricks you can give to the people in your life and ask them to, things you can ask them to do that might help you. I know that a lot of what's been helpful for me has been requests that I've had to make to the people in my life. Because for me it really has been excruciating and debilitating at times. And part of the reason being is I know with cervical instability, your brainstem is sometimes compressed, your cerebral spinal fluid is either blocked or the flow is not what it should be, and that surrounds your brain and your brainstem, and so basically your nervous system is in complete chaos sometimes, or I know mine has been in the past, and so that is why. And so, as always, first and foremost, what helps me the most with my sensory sensitivity or overstimulation, inability to process stimuli, whatever you want to call it, was receiving manual traction, the lifting up at the base of my skull, which I have done several videos on that, and then also wearing the brace. And then ultimately, the best fix will be prolotherapy if it is successful. So far, it has been helpful. And I know for some people that is a fusion surgery. It just depends on your situation. But for me, it has been the manual traction, the bracing, and now prolotherapy have been the most beneficial to my sensory sensitivity, inability to process stimuli. All right, so first and foremost, I'm going to share my experience or parts about it. The hardest part is that to be alive is to be around stimuli. You can't escape it entirely. So, and for me, it has just been my body's inability to adequately process senses. Senses have, in my best way to articulate, have just overloaded my system and have been disabling at times, I would say. So, all right, so for me, when my body has been so flared, the best descriptor I can use is that it has sent me into almost like sensory paralysis, where I can't do anything but be in a dark room, isolated from as much stimuli as possible, without sound, and laying down for hours. And if I'm lucky, I will be able to fall asleep. But unfortunately, from my experience, when my nervous system is so heightened, I describe it as being tired but wired, where I want so badly to be able to fall asleep, because sometimes napping or falling asleep will almost reset my nervous system or give it a little bit of a break. But being so charged sometimes will not allow my body to sleep, which is difficult. So for me, a lot of sensory overload has just caused me to be isolated a lot of the time, because that has provided the most relief outside of fixing my instability itself. All right, so more about my experience. For me, in flares, I was so sensitive to my environment and the people that if I was upstairs in my room, the people downstairs, if they were just walking with socks on, the padding of their feet would send pain through my head and through the rest of my body. There's a tennis court across the street from my house. When I was in flares, I could hear the ball bouncing, and that additionally would send pain through my head and through my body, and just sharp pains at my worst. Some other things that the overstimulation would either exacerbate or cause would be difficulty thinking, difficulty speaking, inability to speak, almost this catatonic state, semi-paralysis, whatever you want to call it. Those are just the best descriptors I can use. When I've been really sensitive, I will have muscle spasms and twitches. Sometimes, I remember one day my whole left side of my body was just twitching and it wouldn't stop because it was just so compromised and at the mercy of stimuli. It has caused just pain in my head, pain in my body, difficulty seeing, blurred vision, ringing in my ears, and ultimately all of my symptoms are caused, if not all, most of them are caused by my instability, but the stimuli and the sensory overload exacerbated everything severely. And so those are just some of the symptoms. I'm not going to go through all of them, but okay, so things you can do for yourself. What I did, if I ever went out, I always brought my little earphones, and I always brought my noise canceling headphones, and I would try to play it safe. So anytime I'm in the car now, I always wear my headphones, even if I'm feeling fine, because much of it is preventing flares, trying to get ahead of the problem as best I can. So just always having those on me have been helpful. And I will link my big noise canceling headphones that I have. And they don't take away the problem, but they just help it, because even with the noise canceling headphones, I can still hear things. Sometimes I double them up. Oftentimes I said this before, but I just have to isolate myself for hours in a dark room. Listening to really soft, soothing music was sometimes beneficial because it blocked out sharp background noises, and so the soft music or that kind of background noise was better than the occasional other noises that I couldn't control from just like the house or people downstairs or people outside. So that's helpful sometimes. And that would, like, eventually, after several hours of being isolated, sometimes my system would be able to re-regulate itself a little bit. I would say if you're out and about, always have an escape plan to leave and go home, or be able to go somewhere where you can isolate yourself. Something that's been helpful has been communicating with the people in my life about my specific triggers. So for me, when I'm in flares, if I'm upstairs in my room and if somebody turns on water downstairs, the sound of the running water is piercing to my head. But ultimately for me, like I've said, I was just so compromised that I needed to fix my instability. And so that's what I'm doing. For me, most of it in relief was just isolation and kind of waiting it out and bearing through the pain and trying to stay as calm as possible through it all, which is difficult, but it is helpful. Another thing is, if I was around people, positioning myself strategically. So if I'm talking to people, not having additional background noise such as TV or music, asking people to sit right in front of me if they're talking to me. Or if there's multiple people, not everyone talking at once, because it was much more difficult for me to track multiple noises. That's helpful. And there's, like I said, a lot of other tips that other people can do in your life and environmental changes that I'm going to upload in another video. This is all for now, but I would say if you can, just try to stay ahead of your flares of sensory sensitivity if you have them. As always, I hope that this is helpful.